Here's what Ringland failure looks like. This is a chunk of the ring, and it is supposed to sit up in here where it's missing, but that's what Ringland failure looks like for those of you that don't know it. This came out of a motor that ran perfect and just had low compression on one cylinder. That's all it was. Made zero sounds, made zero metal, nothing. This portion of the ring is broken, and that's all that happened here. So it's important to note that you can see where this piston ring gap is here, or the opening in the ring, directly over the Ringland failure. So it's really important to note that, because that's going to be a direct correlation to what we're talking about today. What's up, everyone? I'm Logan with 89 Auto Works, and today we are going to be working on this Outback XT. Basically, motor that was in here, fried, completely useless. I have another motor that I had bought that was a core. That motor had Ringland failure, so we're going through and we're putting pistons in, and it's extremely important on any 255, 257 stock piston car that you know that if you're going to be doing any, I mean really even on stock application, but any performance modifications to your block, the piston ring gap on a stock EJ25, 257 piston is way too tight for adding any boost. There's a lot you can do with just opening up ring gap to add reliability to your vehicle. I know a lot of people are like, why would I ever tear my whole motor apart just to get to the pistons and not replace them? Well, a lot of people are not on the forged piston budget, and this is a very cheap way to add some safety to your car, and also you can pick up a little performance with it too if you do it right. So basically, these two pistons right here, OEM Subaru piston. This is an OEM piston. It is did not come in a Subaru box, but it is OEM. It is designed to be identical to the stock piston. So the one thing that I will say is a benefit for this piston is this manufacturer right here also makes Mitsubishi turbo pistons. So a lot of the older Mitsubishi stuff that makes big boost and on stock internals, these are the same company, which is called Safety Corp. They are straight out of Japan, and they make pistons. This is what they make. They make pistons for Subaru. They make pistons for Mitsubishi. The Subaru branded ones are just slightly different. So big difference here is the actual metal makeup of this piston is the exact same as a Mitsubishi turbo piston. So this thing is, I would say it's an OEM piston. That's what it is. That's what I paid for. That's what I bought. But it's slightly better in my opinion than OEM, just because it is less prone to having Ringland failure. Here is a Manley piston. This is a Manley Platinum. This is a 99.5 piston that is actually for my motor. So the big difference between these three, from factory, they're looking for, on an EJ255, they're looking for 7 to 10 thousandths ring gap for your top ring. So it's important to note that 7 to 10 on factory rings is what they're looking for. For a Manley, for the same bore, you're looking at like 23 thousandths for piston ring gap for your upper piston, or for your top ring. It's important to note that the reason that the gap on this piston is so much bigger is because that is a forged piston, meaning forged, when it warms up, it expands significantly more than a cast forged piston. These are all, anything, I mean, this is metallurgy here. Any metal, you start warming it up, it's going to expand. That's basic physics, This piston, when it warms up with that small ring gap, and this is back to the stock versus slightly modified versus heavily modified. Every amount of boost you add obviously adds heat to the cylinder. Everyone always wants to say that Ringland failure is purely from stock OEM Subaru tunes and they get knock and blah blah blah. Sure, there's a lot of details to that can change things and can cause ringland failure. But it's important to also note that that poor tuning could be, I'm not going to say remedied, but it could be safer. If you were looking for a safer way to run that stock tune on stock, you know, just pump gas, you could literally just open your ring gap up and be sitting pretty. These pistons, I've already gapped all the rings on these pistons. Very important to note that each ring on this piston, this is, you know, it has a number 3 on it. Every ring on this piston was gapped to the number 3 cylinder and set for that, kept in sets, put onto this piston, marked, and then this piston is ready to go into the number 3 cylinder with the correct ring gap, as well as number 2, number 1. All of them have you know, 4s right here. All the pistons have been gapped specifically to that block. It was a really good running motor. I did not touch the bearings in it. I did not split the case halves, nothing. All I'm doing here is taking out a piston because I had low compression in that number 4 cylinder, and all I'm literally doing is putting new pistons in it. I cleaned up the bores and then set my ring gap specifically to each piston to ensure that we are going to have a good finished product here. We want to make sure this motor is going to last and not have any shortcomings due to adding new pistons into the motor. If anything, the new pistons should be adding to the life of the motor, which is what we're after here. I've never actually done this. I've never taken a OEM Subaru. This is, like I said, this is a 140,000 mile piston ring, and I have never taken one and stuck it in a cylinder and just measured it to see where it's at from the factory. Important to note that, so the way I do this is the way that we've kind of come up, me and my tuner. I should really say my tuner is the one that's a little bit more seasoned in this than me. But, you know, you look at, like I said, 23 thousandths of an inch for manly pistons. That's for that forged piston. And then obviously the 10 thousandths on the high side of the spec would be from Subaru. So we went ahead and split the difference. And what I ended up doing for the first ring was 16 thousandths of an inch on the top ring, 19, and then the bottom it was it's 3 to 5 thousandths of an inch for your 2 oil rings. Basically on that one, you're just making sure you're not under that measurement. Obviously there is a maximum measurement, but you're not going to be even close to that. In my case, I was like 7 thousandths of an inch on the ring from the factory, so I did not even touch those ones. Well, I touched them, but I did not open them up at all. So we're gonna go ahead and jump over to the block. I'll show you guys exactly how I take these and put them into the bores and just check ring gap and see what we're looking at. All right, guys, so here we have the number 2 cylinder top ring here. This is not, let's see, actually, I'm curious now. Okay, so A piston, A ring, or I'm sorry, A piston, A ring, A cylinder. So how I do this is I take the ring and we just literally just get it to fit just into the top of the bore like that. So this is why I had that top ring off. So I take a piston that has the bottom ring on it, just so you have exact perfect spacing all the way around. Take this piston, move it around a little bit. So now your ring is in this, you're there. And so we have our feeler gauges here. This set specifically is for doing flat tappets, but it works just fine for this. So in a perfect world, 8 thousandths of an inch should fit right in here, because that would be in spec, right, for what Subaru is looking for. And 8 thousandths is tight, real tight. And like I said, this motor already has 140,000 miles on it. I've already put another hone on this block, and then it's still tight at 8 thousandths. Yeah, it's just barely grabbing. So I'm gonna say this is gonna be a 7 thousandths here. Yeah, and it's just hanging up a little bit, so Yeah, we're basically at 7. I can see our ring is not exactly perfectly square. You want your two edges of your ring to be perfectly square, butted up together. And the reason being is because then you don't have an abnormal amount of airflow one way or the other. So you want to make sure they're perfectly in line together, and you want that tight, but that is way too tight. So we're talking the difference of, let's see here. We're talking the difference of 9 thousandths of an inch is where I'm running my ring gap at versus where these rings are on a halfway worn out cylinder that has already been rebored. So it just goes to show you, I would bet that this ring gap brand new was probably like 5 thousandths of an inch. 5 thousandths of an inch, I mean, that right there goes to show you what I'm talking about here. There's a lot of things that can really get screwed up running 5 thousandths of an inch. And just because I'm curious, I'd like to see what the bore is, or the gap here. You can see the gap is significantly larger in this cylinder already, but oh, I was wrong. This one's tight. So 7 feels okay. So basically we're at 7 thousandths of an inch on our top ring all across the board. So that's 7. Just because I'm a curious cat, let's take a look and see what our bottom ring is. I shouldn't say our bottom, our second ring. 10 fits. 11 fits. 12 fits. 13 fits. 14 fits. Here's 15. Let's just jump up to 20, see if it fits there, and we'll work backwards if it doesn't. 20 is just barely tight. Wow. So 19 thousandths on the stock ring here. Look at that difference that you have between that, you know, and like I told you guys, I was running 16 and 19. So 16 thousandths of an inch on my top ring, 19 thousandths of an inch on my bottom ring. And, you know, like I said, that's purely just to open it up so we don't have premature failure, premature wear, or any of those things, because this car, I'm going to be putting a VF52 in this car just because I have one and it's free. So I don't have to spend any more money on this thing, which is the idea. Making money, not spending it, right? Spend money on the fun stuff, not stuff that's to make you money. Anyways, so that's kind of the moral of the story here, guys, is I wanted to just kind of show you guys what goes into this. I'm going to show you also how I gap these, you know, how I open them up and open them to the correct size, because it's important. I did a lot of research to be able to find out any information whatsoever on stock pistons, stock piston ring gap and what they're gapped to, because everyone always says, oh, they're coming from Subaru, they're, you know, good to go, they don't need to do anything. And I mean, a lot of people say that. And you know, could you run them? Sure, you probably could, but I will say that you just always run that risk. And I will say, even these aftermarket pistons and rings, the starting ring gap was at like 10 thousandths of an inch on most of these. It was like an average of 10 to 11 thousandths. So even significantly larger than the factory Subaru gap, but we're opening them up more. Super simple setup here. And I mean, this is nothing fancy at all. I was given this ring grinder here. So a lot of people will tell you not to do this. Do not come in here and squeeze your ring, and you just run such a risk of, you know, not having it perfectly straight. I'm here to tell you that that is not my opinion. I use this method often to just take a lot of material off starting out and just opening it up. You guys got to think, yeah, we're looking for like, we'll be opening it up about 10 thousandths of an inch, and you guys got to be understanding that 10 thousandths of an inch is like literally 2 human hairs or something like that. So we're going to just go ahead and open this up a bit. I'm not putting a ton of pressure on here, just keeping it nice and moving. And then I go the other way. I'll go back this way. So then you guys can see that there's just, you can see the material starting to build up on the end there. So then we're going to jump back over to the cylinder, take a look at that cylinder, and see how much material we've actually taken off. Past 12. Past 13. Let's jump to 16. Oh, real close there. 17's just a hair tight. Wow, I could not have I could not have planned that more perfectly. You know, we were after 16, and I'll tell you, that is not the way you would want to do that, where you're getting it that close. But normally, this is the part I was trying to tell you guys, was normally you would not want to do that. You'd want to do, and that's part of the reason why squeezing the ring on there and cranking on it is hard, because you're pushing pressure and taking way more material than you even realize you are. So it's great to do, you know, one side at a time, go nice and easy, measure. It's really best to like creep up to your measurement, you know, and once you do this a bit, you kind of get a grasp of like, hey, this much pressure, I'm going to take off this much material with this many turns, you know, and by the time you gap one set for a piston, then, you know, it's pretty simple. You know, this is the part I was talking about. You can see that those are pretty damn parallel, but they're just barely off on the outside. It's just a little bit tighter. So we could go back over to the bench, and we will, and we're just gonna work on. We'll open these up to 17 thousandths perfectly, clean up that inside, make these nice and straight so they sit nice and straight in the cylinders, and you guys can see exactly how we clean that up from there. Alright, I gave you guys a little different view here. So this is what we were doing. We were coming in here, squeezing both sides and opening material up. Don't want to do that. I mean, you can do that, that's just fine, but so we're going to just go ahead and just work on just taking a little material off on the top up here. That's the only spot we're really concerned about, is just getting that opened up a little bit. And I might have even, and that's like literally to take off like small amounts. It does not take much at all. Nothing. We're just literally trying to get that gap there to, there we go. You guys can see that's pretty square, but the only way to tell certainly is putting it back in the cylinder. So anyways, guys, I hope this helps you. Just, you know, a couple small details on building an EJ that, you know, it doesn't always have to be manly pistons and manly rods and, you know, doing that stuff to achieve great results. And don't get me wrong, I'm not at all bashing Manly. They make premium product, great stuff. But I am saying that you can make a higher performance Subaru than stock safely and do it in a way that isn't just going to blow up, isn't just going to have Ringland failure, isn't going to be all of the stereotypical things that you hear about Subarus. A lot of those things come down to stock tuning with, you know, just stock parts and trying to stick big horsepower to stuff. And there's so much that comes into play when we're talking about detonation, pre-detonation, knock, fine knock, any of those things right there. There's so much that comes into play that nobody ever talks about, especially with just stock pistons. Because a lot of people say, hey, you know, yeah, could you make 300 wheel horsepower very, very safely with this motor? Absolutely. Absolutely, you could have a very safe 300 wheel car. You could have a safe 300 wheel 205, you know, it can be done. It can be done. There is more to just gapping these rings that I'm not touching on here, but it's pretty much common sense to say that if you open up the ring gap, you are going to have some element of more blow-by than you would from the factory. But in a boosted application, you'd rather have that than not. And then you just take an AOS, add an AOS onto the car. You could have gap your rings, throw an AOS on for more or less half the cost of Manly pistons. And yeah, they're not the same thing at all, and I know they're absolutely not the same thing at all, but the difference is these are good for like 600 horsepower. These are good for like not even close to that. So it's like if you're looking to just up your horsepower level and keep the safety somewhat in the realm still, this is a great option. Anyone that's looking for, you know, putting stock pistons back in their car that's going to be getting anything more than stock. I mean, even just a tune, crank up the tune on a stock motor, this is a great option. I would never, ever, ever go back to stock ring gap, quite frankly, ever. I would always open it up slightly more. In this case, you know, we went a little bit extreme, but I'm gonna push some boost to this car, and you know, it's not gonna be anything too crazy, but it's, you know, we're gonna put some boost to it and just make the thing happy. Anyways, guys, like and subscribe to the channel, and do me a favor and stick around for the next one, because we're gonna be doing a lot of these little easy videos and quick videos for people that don't know a lot of these little details that can really save you a lot in the long run. I mean, really a lot. And there's not really any videos out there on stock pistons and talking about stock ring gap versus you know, more boosted applications. So thanks, guys. See you next time.